Welcome or welcome back if you are regular viewers of our Merill channel. I'm your host, Marc, fund manager at Merill Funds. I've been managing money for over 2 decades. So, welcome. Before we start our investment journey, I would like to thank IK Collections. We are recording at home, a boutique hotel overlooking Baluta Bay, in the heart of St. Julian's. If you are looking for a spa experience, you are the right place. Now, feel free to subscribe if you like our content, and also don't hesitate to visit our website, merillfunds.com. Before we start our journey and our agenda, let me read to you the disclaimer. The content of this presentation has been prepared for general guidance and information purpose only. Any information provided through this presentation do not constitute financial, investment, professional advice, or recommendations. Thank you. The 20th century seems a distant past because we are living now in the 21st century, but it has been reshaping where we are now on the macroeconomic landscape. So now let's start our journey with Japan. Like Germany, Japan has a fantastic history. I just want to point it out few dates, very important. The Edo period, which is passed from 1603 to 1868 under Tokugawa. This is the time of the warlord and the shogun. And it had starting with the Meiji period. The Meiji period starts in 1868 and finish in 1912. This is how the modernizations of Japan and how Japan start to learn from the West. An interesting period. Now, as we know, 1912 to 1945, this is the imperial ambitions when the emperor start to build up, I will say, similar pattern than Germany, like a big empire based on a big army. Unfortunately, we know how it finished with 2 bombs, nuclear bombs, to stop the imperial visions of this Japan. Now, 1945, 99, this is the economical miracles, Japan rapid industrializations, technological growth, strong economy, following by a bubble burst. Since the bubble exploded in the 90s, Japan is trying to rejuvenate its economy, shifting on a different approach, and I think we will discuss about this with the semiconductor industry. We need to speak and start with the context, monetary context, I will say, with the Bank of Japan, who's facing multiple challenges. Why? Because Japan was like nearly for 3 decades in a deflation context, so are not facing any inflations like it was the case from us in the West. Let's explore a few points on that side. Based on the recent comment of the governor of the Bank of Japan, it seems like Japan wants to exit in this negative rate. As we know, in this world, few countries have a negative rate, and Japan is a part of this. The Bank of Japan is optimistic about the economy strength, supporting as move away for the negative interest rate. Inflation's wage growth, positive trends in the wage increasing, and service sector price also. I think we are going in the right direction in Japan, especially from a monetary policy, handing an area of 3 decades of negative rate. Now let's explore the economic figures of Japan. I think it's an interesting case. Japanese economy contracted more than expected on the 3rd quarter, declining by 2.1%. Let's see some figure there, and let's see the GDP. As we can see on the chart, the GDP was never so flamboyant, except as we see like for many countries when the COVID took place and the measure in place and the stimulus. But I think it's quite stagnant, as we can see here on the GDP side. The PMI figures seems like okay, I will say. But let's speak about positive news coming from Japan, and I will say there is a lot of positive news. If you have been invested in Japanese stocks, especially the Nikkei 225, you are approaching at the moment the historical high. And this level, it's I will say, an important level because it didn't reach since December 1989. I'm talking about 1989. So we are back on the track, it seems, for the Japanese economy. So there is like clearly an optimism here. The Japanese government is trying also to push these things and push this optimism, I will say. I think one also positive factors, I know there is a lot of concern about China, a lot of money is moving out from the country, and I think Japan could be the right place to be because a lot of US investors scared about the tensions between US and China at the moment have been moving their money on the Japanese economy. So it's a positive trend, I will say, for Japan. And I will say it's probably a good alternative if you want to play Asia here. Consumer confidence, it's not so bad as we can see in the chart. So the things are pointing in the right directions on the demand side, but also on the supply side. Why? Because as we know, Germany has major challenge with the electrical vehicles coming from China. But I think the Japanese automakers could be the beneficiary of this war between Europe and US versus China and could be the winner with the electrical vehicles. We will discuss later on about this and the potential positive impact for Japan. Two more slide, I will say, I want to show you on the economic figures. Here we can see the retail sales, not so bad, I will say. And the next one will be the unemployment rate, which is doing quite well, especially when you know Japan was in the time of the deflations and it was very difficult for the employer and the employee to find a place to meet in the way there is like a lot of zombie companies who was the characteristic of these last 3 decades in Japan. Semiconductors has a special space for Japan. Why? It was in a dominant positions back to the 80s and the 90s with be 50% of the worldwide revenue. Now obviously it's not anymore this dominant player, but probably Japan is back on the track. In the 2020, the position of Japan, it's not anymore 50 like in the 80s or the 90s, it's just 10%. But maybe, as we say, it could be a rising sector for the Japanese economy. Lot of leadership in memory, CMOS image, microcontroller, and power semiconductors. Clearly an advantage for a lot of Japanese companies. Recently, Taiwan Semiconductors invested in Kumamoto in the south of Japan, a big factory. So clearly here, there is like the semiconductors industry is rising and back again. A lot of connections between the Chinese chip makers and the Japanese, that's for sure. Now, just for the audience, as we know, Japan is also following the recommendations of the US sanctions. As we know, a lot of problem on the ASML from Netherlands. So a strict export will have also an impact on the Japanese company. I think definitely here Japanese companies will still dominate a significant portion of the market for various chipping making tools, making Japan a valuable destination for the Chinese chip makers seeking partnership, especially now as we know the relations between China and the West is not at the top. It seems like could be like China, which is close neighbor Japan, have a better relationship. Of course, the concern for the Japanese company, it's clearly that the Chinese, they try to do some reverse engineering on the advanced technology, and that's the major issue here. Another point, and probably the last point on the semiconductors, GSR was taken over by the Japanese investment corporations. Why? It's a government-backed funds overseen by the Ministry of Economy with an initiate of 6.4 billion. I think Japan is really considering to nationalize the crown jewel of the semiconductor industry. Another concern here in Europe, we don't have this kind of approach, I will say. Now, as we know, ASML was a dominant player in Europe in the side of the supply chain, but could be not for long. As we know, Canon, very well known for his camera, his printer, is now set to challenge ASML dominance in the semiconductors. And I would say with his technology, which is called nano imprint technology, he could clearly challenge ASML. And it could be good to stimulate, I will say, the competitions, because here the competitions was quite low, knowing that ASML is at the beginning of the supply chain as the dominant positions, and no one was challenging ASML. Considering the nano imprint technology has been in development for over 15 years, the company challenge remain high, but what they want to do, the 5 nanometers node, they aim to go to 2 nanometers old, which is like clearly an advantage against ASML. Let's speak about little bit the automobile industry, who's representing a small amount compared to Germany. It's like we're representing 3% of the GDP, when Germany it's like, as we know, 15%, nearly 15%. Let's say what the chairman of Toyota said about Akiko Toyoda, predicting that the electrical vehicle shares will represent 30% of the global demand. Japan industry was always quite reluctant to the full electrics, always have the option of the hybrid, and as we know, Toyota was quite a pioneer on that era with the Prius. I think there is like a lot of positive sign. Why? For Toyota, strong demand from US and Europe help Toyota to hit its annual production record. So clearly Toyota is on the track, even if it's not a full electric, but like I say, hybrid. I think it's a real competitor for the Chinese electrical vehicles, but also for the European electrical vehicle here. I mean, Toyota has been developing special battery, and they try to challenge to extend 1,000 kilometers, challenging the Chinese, but also the European in this era. So wait and see what's the new model Toyota has to offer, extending a range of 1,000, when at the moment I will say Europe and Chinese, probably the limit is at 600 kilometers. Let's speak about politics, which is an obscure topic for us based in Europe, I will say, because even we don't know this new prime minister. The prime minister have been rotating in a fast way in Japan every year, except the few one and the one who has been killed recently. At the moment, the prime minister called Kishida Fumio has been embarked in many scandals, and he has a disapproval rating of 75% at the end of December 2023. A lot of problem with his party, the Liberal Democratic Party, who has been a dominant player and dominant party here. So here there is no coalition like in Germany. We're not talking about the far right or the far left. There is just a dominant player, which is the Liberal Democrat Party, which is in the problem of a lot of scandal at the moment in Japan. For the last part of the agenda, the demographic, as we know, Japan is facing major challenge, because at the moment, more than 30% of the population is above 65. And as we know, also the problem is the birth rate is very low. I think the new generations, they don't want to build up a family. It's a very, I will say, a lonely approach society. It seems like there is a clear divergence between the male and the female in Japan. The Japanese government is still to try to revive the things, try to push the natality, because it's clearly a problem. As we know, half of the population of Japan by 2050 will be vanished, and this is a serious problem. So they are trying to push in these directions in the way like trying, I will say, with technology, with robot and etc. But I think they have been failing so far on that direction. Thank you for your time and your attention, and I hope we will see you soon for another macro talk. Thank you very much.